People, hypocrisy of any kind is never a pretty sight. And it's usually sniffed out like a dirty rat. Hey, you dirty rat. Of course, this past year, we've seen politicians take hypocrisy to a whole new level. An in-your-face, out in the public space level. Like in hair salons, in restaurants, and even in French laundromats. What is that about? Well, so this morning our focus is on a certain type of hypocrisy. See, Jesus, having told his disciples of the greater righteousness expected of them in Matthew chapter 5, a righteousness both demanded and commanded for kingdom saints and patrons, kingdom patrons, now warns such ones of the danger of religious hypocrisy, of practicing righteousness with improper motives, done more to serve self than to serve God, done more to promote self than to please God, done more to elicit human praise rather than to glorify God. Such a person eager and endeavoring to be the benefactor and or recipient of human applause, acclaim, and approval. Well, guys, our sermon this morning entitled The Manner and Motive of Giving. And so without further ado, we now move into chapter 6 of the book of Matthew. So I had to move my marker over. Actually last week I moved it over. Been in 5 a long time, but today we enter chapter 6. So Matthew chapter 6, verse 1. Let me find my glasses. So Jesus, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. For then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. So we begin with the righteous warning. The righteous warning. Guys, Jesus begins here with the word beware. A word that means to give heed to watch out for, and to give careful attention to. But to what? To what? Well, of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. So then a constant vigil when doing righteous acts. By the way, the phrase practicing righteousness is an expression found elsewhere in the Bible, and especially in 1 John. So keep your place there, but let's go to 1 John just for a moment. So 1 John chapter 2. Go down to verse 28. And now, little children, abide in him, that when he appears, we may have confidence and not shrink from him in shame at his coming. If you know that he is righteous, you may be sure that everyone who practices righteousness has been born of him. Okay, chapter 3, verse 7. Little children, let no one deceive you. Whoever practices righteousness is righteous, as he is righteous. And then a little further down, verse 10. By this it is evident who are the children of God, who are the children of the devil. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor is the one who does not love his brother. Gosh, it sounds a lot like what we read in James this morning in Sunday school. Faith without works is useless. Faith without righteousness is useless. Righteousness without practicing righteousness is what? So people, righteousness refers to any good deed that a person may do as part of his or her service to God. And thus Jesus' warning back in Matthew, go back to Matthew. Jesus' warning in Matthew is not with the doing of righteous acts, but with the manner and the motive in relation to. Of course we're supposed to do righteous acts. Of course we're supposed to practice righteousness. I mean, again, that's kingdom living, and Jesus has already elevated that righteousness in chapter 5 over and over and over again. This is what you heard. But let me tell you, let me give you a new word, authoritative word, and a word from the Lord himself. So the manner and the motive in relation to, like practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. So the manner being in front of other people. The motive being to be seen by them. That people may observe one's righteous act. So we got to make sure we do it in front of other people. That they may observe. With the purpose being to elevate the doer of such a deed, like through such means as public recognition, acclaim, and approval. Which means what is done is no longer a simple act of divine service to God and for God, practicing righteousness, but deliberate and orchestrated, made for public demonstration and display. It's kind of like, sports the last year. We can't play without fans. We need the recognition. We need the acclaim. Who's going to watch us? Well, nobody's going to watch the NBA anymore. They're not watching it. The ratings have gone way down. And for other reasons. But isn't that why you as a kid, you play sports, you want your parents to be there. You want some recognition for your hard work. I've been working with my team right now. We've had over 10 practices. They just want to play now. Their parents want them to play. They want to see what they're doing. And that is good. Jesus is saying, beware of this type of thing when practicing righteousness. Deliberate, orchestrated, made for public demonstration and display. Just for then you will have no reward from your Father who's in heaven. Who is in heaven. So guys, that which is done solely or primarily for personal honor or gain may accomplish its objective. Because you can do that. Anybody can do that. But God will grant no further award. I mean, for misusing such righteousness, there will be no compensation. No reward for what is called ostentation, of putting on a show or display intended to impress others. Practicing this kind of righteousness is all about the person. Trying to impress others. Again, we talked about this in parenting class, as you give the kids some incentive to do something and then they only do it when the parents are in the room. Come on in here, I'm being good. Look at, I shared. Parent walks in the kitchen, give me that back. That's a great word, ostentation, of putting on a show or display intended to impress others. It's a great word, but a bad practice. So yeah, why should there be a benefit for that? Speaking of a deed that was done primarily to receive personal acclaim and not necessarily in order to serve God. Again, more about the person, more about me than God. Truly, the doer of such a public display has already secured his or her reward. People have watched, people have observed, people have been impressed. Such a person doesn't need any more. That's his objective. Has nothing to do with God. So there you go, you did it. And people watched. And maybe some were impressed. So they aimed at recognition and they got it. I mean, that's exactly what they got. So, good show. Good show. Good outward show of ostentation. Of purposely trying to impress others. Putting yourself on display, your good deed on display. But so why would such a person expect the further benefit of divine approval or reward? St. Charles Spurgeon said regarding this verse, you cannot expect to be paid twice for such a display. God ain't going for that. God is not going to do that. Don't expect to be paid twice. Well, friends, to trade the goal of pleasing the Father for the trivial and idolatrous goal of pleasing man will never do. It will never do. Why? Because everyone, even non-Christians, can smell a dirty rat. Can smell a dirty rat. Can smell hypocrisy a mile away. Especially of the religious kind, which, by the way, is unfortunately all too common. Well, so now, and in following, Jesus addresses first. So that verse is really the beginning of some other sermons. First, giving. Then secondly, prayer. And thirdly, fasting. So first he tackles giving. Verse 2. So back to Matthew chapter 6, verse 2. Thus when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. So let's now discuss the wrong way to give. That's our second point. The wrong way to give. People, like we said, Jesus begins with the giving of alms. Alms. Doesn't sound like even a word, alms. It's like I'm saying something wrong. You said what? A term that is not used so much today. I don't know if any of these teens even have ever heard that word. Have you ever heard that word? You have heard it? Becker's always, they've heard everything. These are smart kids. But yeah, alms. So not much use today, but what is the giving of money to or food for the relief of the poor? That's what it is. What we call today, not alms, charitable giving. Charitable giving. It's probably in your tax form, right? And to such giving, he is definitely for it. Jesus is all for it. Charitable giving. The Jews likewise took giving to the poor very seriously as a duty. Giving to the needy, forming a key part of ancient Jewish life and an important part of one's practice of righteousness. Basically, you could just say it's just what you do. It's what you do. In your budget, you have some charitable giving, helping out others that are less fortunate. One's religious duty to help the poor. And thus the question is not whether to do it. No. Listen, Jesus, when you give, so no, but instead, how to do it. Speaking of manner and motive. And so according to Jesus, this is not the way to do it. Sound no trumpet before you, which I believe is figurative language by the Lord. I mean, studying this passage, people had some ideas of what this means by trumpet. They were boxes. They looked like trumpets. They were in the courtyard. And that was dismissed by others. The sounding of the trumpet, a literal trumpet, and that was also dismissed. Like, you don't usually do that in a synagogue. So I too believe this is figurative language of making a public display, a ostentatious demonstration. I mean, we actually use this phrase today sometimes. By the way, surely there cannot be anything more public than the sounding of a trumpet. I mean, this morning we had the grandkids spending the night, and I'm in bed, and I don't know what time it is. I was just super tired from the whole week, and especially yesterday, and I'm in bed, and I hear this crying, and I did the typical dad thing. I don't hear nothing. I don't hear nothing. I knew Tina was going to go take care of it. I could hear it. And it was funny. I thought it was Wrigley and Ren, but Wrigley was actually in Delaney's room, so he was sleeping fine. So it was this little girl that we have, little curly-haired girl that's just making all this noise, which I didn't hear. I didn't hear any of it. Just for a second, back to bed. But that's nothing. I mean, it wasn't faint crying, but it was crying. Could you imagine, though? I go in the house with a trumpet, wake up my kids in their rooms. Now that's a display. That's a demonstration. Right? You guys in the military, did you ever have to do that? Wake up to that? I don't know. They still do that? Yeah, okay. I've been through the horse races, back in the day, and that's the call out. We got a race coming up. Anybody play the trumpet? Okay, yeah. You don't do that. You don't practice that in the house, right? When you're growing up, that is like for the garage. That's like with the drum set. That's out in the garage. But yeah. So anything more public sounding than the trumpet. But again, I believe there is no evidence for a literal blowing of horn. Jesus, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets. Guys, hypocrites back in the day were actors who performed before others, who played a part and put on a show. That was, if you were a hypocrite then, it was like you were an actor. You liked performing in front of people on the stage. Moreover, the synagogue being public places for Jewish prayer and worship. And the streets being narrow places for public parading and demonstrations. And thus, hypocrites do sound trumpets, figuratively speaking. You see, they do want to be noticed. So they make a lot of noise when they give. It's like if they were sounding the trumpet. Like, hey, over here. I'm about to put money in the offering bucket. Actually, not the offering bucket. This is for charitable giving. Check it out. Look what I'm about to do. So whether it be in the synagogue or in the streets, I mean, it's all a stage for them. Like, I can imagine this in the synagogue, right? They'd be like, I'm about to give. They're out in the streets, and they're thinking narrow streets. I mean, anybody that does anything out in a narrow street, you're going to see that person. You know, a big parade. Here I am. I'm going to give to charity. I'm going to help out the needy. Jesus, that they may be praised by others. Hypocrites wanting nothing more than audience applause and approval. Just like actors today. Putting on a show. So speaking of human praise, of being praised by other men and women. Wow, look at that. Look at that wad he just pulled out. Oh my gosh, that's all going into the charitable giving box. So this is what they are primarily interested in. The real purpose of hypocrites. Wanting everyone to know about their giving and their practice of righteousness. Should remind us of the Pharisees and their approach. So they perform for the audience and for the audience's approval. They put on a show to show off their piety and their self-appointed good deeds. And unfortunately, as well, their idolatrous insincerity. Seeking recognition and reputation and ultimately glory for themselves. So desiring human praise more than God's praise. Looking to impress others and receive all the accolades. Yet the Lord rejects such wrongful attitudes and actions. Last part of verse 2. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. Kind of like verse 1. Such ones have received their payment in full. I mean, that's what they were after. They wanted to be on stage. They wanted people to watch them. They wanted the acclaim, the accolades, the recognition. And how could you not help but look at them and observe them? They're blowing a trumpet. They're lifting themselves up. They're making a lot of noise so people will watch them. So again, they have received their payment in full because they have given out of an attitude of loving human praise and have gotten exactly what they desired. Well, then that is all they will get. That's what they wanted. That's what they'll get. That's all they'll get. I mean, because they have set their sights on man's praise and have no real godly aspirations to lift up God's name, to glorify God, they're done. It's almost like you did it, now get off the stage. It's the show is over. Close the curtain. You're done. I mean, go home. You got exactly what you wanted. Their receipt paid. Their account has now been closed. There is nothing more to follow. No other reward forthcoming. None whatsoever. As Charles Spurgeon commenting on this verse states, whatever they may have done they have taken full credit for it in the praise of men. It's all about themselves. Here's your pay. People that came to watch you, now take your pay and go home. And don't expect any more. At least not by God. Well, say such ostentation nullifies the possibility of any spiritual benefit for the alms giver. Well, so let's finish with our third point, the right way to give. The right way to give. First part of verse 3. But when you give to the needy, well, people, the way to avoid hypocrisy is not to cease giving. Jesus goes right into it. But when you give to the needy, so we're not teaching that. Jesus is not teaching that. Well, just don't give. That'll make it easy. He goes right into it. So don't stop doing that. But when you give, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Guys, the lack of communication between left and right hands is delightfully vivid way of describing absolute secrecy. No one is to know about it. No one is to know about it. And a rather striking expression that forbids the giver to gloat over how good he or she is. Basically, just do it and then don't think any more about it. You did a good thing. You're doing a good thing. Verse 4, first part, so that your giving may be in secret. So give with such secrecy that you scarcely know what you have given. So even you don't take such credit in it and think this is so great and this is such a big thing I'm doing. It's just part of, again, kingdom life, part of practicing righteousness. We don't have to make a big thing about everything we do. We're not to do that. The glory is supposed to go to God, not to us. Just the aim should be doing the good deed in secret. And definitely not with the desire for praise from others. And yet that does not mean that it is entirely unnoticed. Jesus' last part of verse 4, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Guys, you can be sure God sees it and takes notice of it. You don't have to make a big deal about it. You yourself don't even have to think, well, this is really good of me. God notices what you did. You did the right thing, and God sees it. So not only does he notice what his children do, but he responds, he rewards, he repays. By the way, such rewards are already outlined in the Beatitudes. We already talked about many rewards that we see there. Well, people, Charles Spurgeon regarding verses 3 and 4 says, do it so by stealth. Do it so by stealth. Do it unto God. Any praise from his lips, any reward from his hands will be of priceless value. Oh, to live with an eye to that alone. That's what Spurgeon says. Do it for him. He doesn't need a big show. He doesn't need a big display. He doesn't need a big demonstration. He sees what you're doing. So just do it. Thus, a person whose only motive is loving service to the Lord and who never thinks that he has deserved any reward does in fact receive it. That's the attitude. That's the attitude. I'm not expecting it. I'm not have this attitude, well, God, you saw what I did. So now what are you going to do? Nope. I did it. It's my duty. Again, part of life in the kingdom. I want to help out those that are in need, and I'm not going to think any more about it. And if I see blessings in my life, well, I'll count that as all good. But I'm not expecting anything. But I know the promises in the Bible. And again, we're not doing things just for rewards, but the Bible talks about rewards, so there you go. Don't say you can't think that. Don't say, don't talk about that. Don't preach about that. The Bible does, right here. But that's not why we do it. We do it to glorify God. Let me just say one thing before I get into my conclusion. I do not believe this has anything to do with giving here in the church, passing out the bucket. Like Tim passes the bucket and put it down, guys, keep it low. I'm going to do this in secret. Which hand do I have it in? I have no idea. Just drop it in there. That is taking something to the extreme. We're talking about giving to the needy. We're talking about a public display. And the practice that we do in here is not that. It's not that. I mean, if anybody wants to watch anybody, they could turn their head and nobody's sounding trumpets. We're just giving. It's part of who we are, part of what the church does, his body. And don't take this to the extreme. Well, I have to only give cash and this has got to be done in secret. And that's extreme measure. That's not what Jesus is saying here. So I hope that's not your thinking. That's legalism. That's extreme. I think some people take this verse and to anything. Nobody should know. Friends, Christian giving is to be marked by self-sacrifice and self-forgetfulness, which means the manner of giving and one's motive deep down inside is important. Is of utmost importance. Again, it's what's in the heart. What are you doing? What are you trying to accomplish? Who are you wanting to glorify? Jesus warning his disciples and kingdom patrons to beware of practicing their righteousness in a hypocritical fashion. Giving in the church in public as a bucket goes around is not being a hypocrite. I'm sorry. I would strongly disagree with you. Unless you're over there, holding the bucket and tapping it and, you drop out a ton amount of change so everybody can hear it. And I'm not going to say that because kids will go, wait, I bring change. What's the other, the old joke is, pass the bucket or the thing and you hit it underneath like you put something in it. Bing. Wow, that guy really dropped some money down in there. So again, practicing the righteous in a hypocritical fashion. First, by stressing the wrong kind of giving. And secondly, by pressing the right way to give. So yes, it is important to give, but not to be known to give. It is important to give, but not to be known to give. Nobody needs to know it, but God. Our single focus is said to be the audience of one. That's all I'm concerned about is glorifying God. Again, I'm not thinking reward. I'm thinking about his glory, his kingdom, what he has called me to do, practicing righteousness for him. I mean, that's what needs to be in our hearts. And of God the Father accepting what we give. With little or no thought of what others may think or say or do. They're really not part of the equation. It's really me and God. Me and my relationship with God. Me and my giving to others, to help others. Nobody else needs to know about it. I don't need to sound a trumpet. And really, I just need to do it. So aiming at doing our good deeds of giving in secret. In secret. So not with trumpets, nor drums, sorry, Jeffrey, or blazing guns. Sorry, all men in here and some ladies. But of parting with such wealth in sincerity and stealth. And therein lies the manner and motive of giving. Not with trumpets, nor drums, or blazing guns, but of parting with such wealth in sincerity and by stealth.